Well, can I call you to order? Order, or something like that. We shouldn't have chosen the motto, helping your community to flourish, because you're all flourishing and talking to one another. Never mind, that's fine. Let me first of all say thank you for coming, and thank you to everybody who's supported us in lots of ways, getting so far as we have. We're now at the point where we've got some permissions to move forward, but the presentation will kind of update everybody from the beginning to where we are now, so that those who don't know are on the same sheet as those who have a long-term knowledge of things. So first, thank you. Secondly, fire safety. In the work that we're hoping to do, there will be a fire exit in the vestry. That doesn't exist yet. So the only exit is the one that you came in by. Just walk sensibly. If you smell a fire, just speak up early. But that's fine. Usually it's when fires manage to get going that you have trouble. Microphones, right. There are a number of people doing presentations. If we just try and, when you come up, if you can keep the microphone below your face so that people can see your face, it always looks nicer that way. And just stand reasonably close to it so you can be heard. If later on we come to questions, we'll pass this microphone around. And again, if you hold it about at your chin, then we get a good clean sound. If you hold it down here, and if you hold it up there, it gets a bit. So if you hold it about where your chin is, if you want to ask any questions, then other people can hear what you say. In the objections we had to the work that we were hoping to do, one of the suggestions was, why would you need an inside toilet? Can't you just keep people going down the yellow brick road 50 metres with a dodgy surface and steps? Hopefully, in the not too distant future, there will be a disabled toilet. At the moment, it's out the door, up the steps, down the yellow brick road, and the door should be loose enough at this time of year that you don't have to kick it. Food and drink, there is plenty. We don't want any left over. So when you get opportunity, there is, then please do eat, drink, and be merry. And the structure of this evening is 20-20-20. That's very good vision, slightly better than normal. There'll be 20 minutes approximately of presentation, 20 minutes to chat and ask questions or wander around, see things, and then 20 minutes more presentation. Hopefully that's about how it's going to work, and then time to chat and finish off the food. You don't necessarily need to finish off the wine. I'm quite happy to do so later. That's where we are. I'm going to hold on to my notes. They look very long, but they hopefully are not. Many of you will know that this building was built in 2025, and it's been serving the local community for almost 800 years. But there is a real risk that there will not be a church here by the end of the next century. That actually we won't have a church in Hook by 21-25, or even halfway through the century, or even sooner than that. And the reasons why are, we're on the Heritage at Risk register. That's a national register which says your building's falling down and it needs urgent attention. That's because of the roof, which isn't yet leaking, but the tiles that are up there are very old and are very fragile and could at any point start being problematic. The walls, there is some underpinning needing, there's some stonework needs replacing, and some of the windows need work on. So we're on the Heritage at Risk register, and that work needs to be done urgently. The architect will tell you what urgent means in terms of a building of this age. When you get to 800 years, it isn't tomorrow, but we do need to get that work done, and we want to get that done. The church membership are struggling. Those who've cared for it for the recent generations are struggling to raise the money or the energy to keep things going as they are. So we need to address that. The Church of England are creaking. They seem to have insufficient funds to continue functioning as they have done, and centrally they show little inclination to use the limited resources by sustaining rural churches, when larger cathedrals and city churches are also in desperate need of support. The current Bishop of Sheffield has said that many rural churches will have to close, and a statement that I told him made me sit at my desk and cry, because I don't want to see many rural churches close. And he says there's no hit list, and the reality is it's up to us. If we can keep the thing going, he'll support us. If we get to the point where we really can't keep it going, they're not going to come in and solve our problems for us, I think. Then there's the government's Taylor report of 2012. This was a report into our national heritage and our grade listed buildings, particularly our churches. And they recommended that local people look after local heritage, that it wasn't the government who were going to put stacks of money into organising the care of heritage buildings. It was local people who look after local heritage. And actually that's how they started. All of these churches were built by local people. Local people have looked after them. So it's only a continuation of what's happened in the past. They said that buildings shouldn't just be in good condition, so don't just repair them and keep them used very little of the time, but they need to be in good use. They need to be used more than the 2 to 3 hours and occasional funerals and weddings that we are currently using ours for. And there are grants, and there are grants which will make a significant difference to the huge amount of money we need to finish all the work. And we can access those, but we can't access them unless we are a well-used community resource. If we're just here for the church club to meet and support a few religious people who want to do religious things, money's not going to be available to us to do that, and we will have to just raise the money ourselves. So that's really where we're at as to why it could disappear. We don't want to end up like St. Paul's in Gaul. I think is that the right position of where St. Paul's was? Sort of. It was somewhere on that end of Morrison's, wasn't it? Down Wetherall Street. St. Mary's in Old Gaul. I was going to put Hook Methodist Chapel in, but I didn't get down to photograph the house that's there now. This is Hewish. Some of my relatives are buried in Hewish churchyard. And this is Hewish Church. It's a grade 2 building. We are grade 2 star. And this is what it looks like inside. It's a rather beautiful house. My brother sent me these because the house was up for sale, but I didn't have £625,000 to buy it. But there you are, that's Hewish. And really, I'd rather that this wasn't that. Or St. Philip's in Rawcliffe Bridge, which is also a house. Rawcliffe Bridge Chapel, which is also a house. And we don't want to be Kennings, much as Kennings is a very good organisation and anything else. We don't really want to be like the URC Church, which is now a buildings merchant. There are many other examples of church buildings which have closed. And being grade 2 star, we are a bit further up the road and less likely to be closed. But the reality is that it could come. Grade 2 is turned into a house. Grade 2 star, if there's not enough money, it may come. So how do we avoid that? And that's part of what we're trying to do. And we could have a landed benefactor. When the Sutherlands were here, Escort Sutherlands particularly, they had rather a lot of money, and they paid for the last restoration pretty well themselves, equivalent to about 250,000 or 300,000 in their money, in our money today. And if they did that, I think in Rawcliffe the church was built by the Crakes, who built it because they wanted the old type of setup where the vicar would preach to the estate workers and make sure that they did what the estate wanted. So if we could find somebody who wants to pay for everything, we could keep going in exactly the way that we are. So if you know anybody who wants to, we can just get all the repairs done, keep the church the same way, use it for a few hours a week, and that's fine. But we don't seem to have that as an option. So we need to find a way to make the building used more often by more people who benefit from this beautiful space. And that's the crux of why, as a result of the Taylor report and so on, that there is funding available. There are ways of helping us keep this church up. We don't, as a community, have to raise all the money. And some of it, some of the most expensive bits, like we think the last bit of the project could cost about £325,000, roughly. Actually, a lot of that can be raised out of grants, most of it, but not if we're not using the building. If it's just sat here empty, we won't access that kind of money. But if we can get it used, and we get it used well, and in appropriate ways, then we can access national money to help us as a community continue to have a building for us. There is the problem of Victorian pews, which is one which is quite poignant in some people's views. They face one way. Our building is absolutely full of them, bar the two thin bits down the side, and they're inflexible, and they give, in the end, few uses for the church. We can have concerts, we can have lectures, we can do church. We don't think in Hook that we're going to have enough concerts and enough lectures and enough church money to be able to pay for all of the future of the church. But if somebody has a good way of doing all that, we could keep the church as it is without doing anything about the pews. The church itself is medieval and had a Tudor period. There is a beautiful Tudor chair up there, and a Jacobean chair and a Jacobean communion table, various things. And in the medieval period, as we'll look at a little bit, the building would have been probably set up with a sanctuary, a holy area at the front, permanently kept holy. And then the rest of the building was used in all sorts of ways. We don't know whether that happened here, but most medieval buildings, that was the way they were. And they were used for markets, for meetings, for the court leet, for all sorts of events, because frankly this is by about 400 years the oldest stone-built building in Hook and Gull. There were no other stone-built buildings of any significance in this area for a long time, so they would have used it probably it didn't have pews. The idea of backs to the wall were because there were a few benches probably against the wall where the elderly and infirm would sit. So we can kind of go backwards and remove the pews which had been put in by the Victorians in the nave, but keep the more high quality ones in the chancel, and then make the space into a flexible space which can be used for community and church use. And we will then be able to save all the rest of the significant heritage and keep the building available to people and available as a church, but also available in other ways. And so our plans do look at removing the pews, levelling the floor, putting flexible seating that we can store and put we've got We're planning to have a seating that will fit 100 chairs about where Jason sat. From Jason backwards, the chairs will all go in there so that you could completely clear the area. So if you wanted to have an art exhibition, or you wanted to have, which ran all week, or things like that, you could clear them completely. And most of the time, there'll probably be some seating in. A disabled access toilet, which is going in the vestry over there. Tom's going to talk through some of these things. A refreshment facility, because as one of my brother's bosses once said, meeting without eating is cheating. We do, if you look in the Bible, there's lots of meeting and eating. Meeting and eating and drinking is a way of drawing community together. And what we're about is community flourishing. We need those opportunities. I think the pubs do a brilliant job at actually building community, don't they? By offering an opportunity to meet and drink and eat sometimes together. So we want something. Improved storage, we don't want the place to look a mess. We're going to put a nice thing around our chairs when they're stored so that they're not just sat at the back looking ugly. And better AV. Currently it's not too bad, but we'll tidy it up and make it neater and get rid of all the cables that are lying around and all that kind of stuff. There's going to be a fire exit, the oil tank's moving, and there's probably other things which I've forgotten. That leads to many uses, and this is the Knit and Natter Group meeting. There's, I think, some kind of children's activity going on at the back there. And our aim is that those uses don't take over other uses in the village. The village hall has a brilliant purpose and some really good things going on in it. We don't want to try and move all the stuff from the village hall here and leave the village hall struggling. That's not what we want. What we want is to support the other village facilities and businesses similarly, and there's some really other good spaces and places and things going on. So what we need to do is try and bring in new activity into this space. And actually, to access some of that money, we don't have to be running 24/7. Some of the grants that you can get are recognise that in a village we're not going to have to be like a town and bring in thousands of people, but we can access that money so that we can keep it going and keep activities going. So we can do small groups, children's activities, schoolwork, other education, art, coffee mornings, heritage groups, exhibitions, displays, concerts, lectures, modern worship, traditional worship, beautiful weddings, lovely baptisms, supportive funerals, and all sorts of other things that you can think of that I didn't put on that list. And these, as I say, allow us to access the grants, enable us to pay for the big costs, get the work done to get us off the heritage register, but also build community. Those kind of things where we can face one another. That's one of the problems with pews, is you're not facing one another, aren't you? We need some space to do that. And we can do all those kind of things. In our initial thinking, it seemed desirable to retain some of the pews. Certainly to me, I like the idea of having some of the pews kept and some more flexible space so that we could do that and it would work. But for, and like today, we've got this lovely space at the back where all we've done is take out a few pews and we could have put chairs at the back and we could use that space, and all sorts of things could be happening in here during the week using sufficient space at the back and down the sides, and we could have kept the pews at the front. But we have a use which is going to be explained about in a moment by Caroline, that means that it's actually really important to be able to take the front pews out. And also making the pews, a friend of mine did it in his church, he made the pews movable. So some of the pews stayed and you just moved them around when you wanted, they weren't too heavy. These ones just aren't stable enough to do that unless you're very careful, and we think there's too much of a hazard with that, and they probably wouldn't last very long if they were being moved around all the time. Some really solid, strong pews you can do that with. Church near Doncaster, I can't remember its name, has got lovely pews that they move around and they put round tables and things. So we've decided that we want to put chairs in. But Caroline's going to come and speak about why we need the pews out at the front and other things that the school might do. I thought we might need... Yeah, well, when we get
You talk about covering my face.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to.
I do feel like I've been lulled here under false pretences. Philip said, would you like to come and have some wine and cheese at church? I said, yeah, great, thank you. Could you come and speak about things? But I am actually delighted to come and speak about the way that Hook Primary School, so I'm the head teacher at Hook Primary School. You might think, well, you know, Hook Primary School is a church school, it is a Church of England school, so of course they're going to have a relationship with the church, it goes without saying. But I think I wanted to start by saying how special that relationship is. I've not worked in another church school, so I can't compare, but you know, we have members of staff that choose to get married in this church. I was christened at this church. I don't know if you know that. I was christened at this church. We have, you know, people that families that come to our school don't all live in the village. They come from, we're a popular school. They come from out of the village, but we bring them to Hook Church, and they're welcomed into Hook Church and part of that community. And it's so lovely to see some of our past pupils here today that I know that have built up traditions with this church, even if it's not their local church, and they're coming back and using this church for things that they need. Unfortunately, we have had staff funerals as well, haven't we, at this church? But it all goes to show just how special this church is for our community. So I think people at the back there will remember using the church right from the start, for coming into having assemblies and special moments where we get all of the children into church. It's one of our most special times. After COVID, when we couldn't use the church for such a long time, it's one of the things that will stick in my mind, that first time that we could come back to church and we saw it full again and people were singing together and smiling, and the children really do love being here. We've got the previous head of Hook Primary School sat at the back as well. So she... Have we got... Is David here as well? No. Well... But they will vouch for the fact that Hook School has grown significantly over the years. I've been at Hook myself, at Hook Primary School, for nearly 23 years now, and you know, I've seen it grow myself over that time. But even, you know, in recent years, when we've had the pews in, we got to a point where we could just about fit just the children in and nobody else. So the children and the staff were having these lovely experiences, but the parents couldn't come and enjoy those with their children. Until Philip had this amazing idea of taking out some of the front pews so that the children can sit on the floor. The children sit on the floor a lot. You know, we sit on the floor for assemblies in school, so it's not something that, you know, that they would be worried about. You know, they quite like sitting on the floor. And the amount of children that we could fit in using the church in that way meant that we could invite parents to come and see their children in special assemblies. But I have to say, the guilt that I feel, Philip, every time that I know we're bringing our school to church, because I know that it's these guys that have to take all of the pews out for our special assembly in church, and then they have to bring them all back in again so that it's ready for the next event. And I know that is, they say that that's fine. They smile and they say that's fine.
It's worth it, because what happens when we take the pews out is that the children who are maybe more this height, and they're not so easily seen, but once you've got the children all sat on the floor, from the back the parents can see them. And the rest of the school can see them, because they suddenly become above the height of the children sat there. And that's a really important thing, because one happens usually when they come here, and Ken Barkley has been very good at trying to help the children to do this, is that the children lead the worship and lead the assemblies. And so being able to see them is really important. And as you can see, less easily seen when I'm kneeling. But then, of course, I should be kneeling all the time, shouldn't I?
The other thing they do, Philip, is they swing the legs, and the noise they make when they kick the pews in front almost makes it inaudible, doesn't it? But so we know that's a tradition that has been part of our school for a long, long time. Well before I joined the school. So it's got that legacy there, and we know we're seeing sort of families bringing their new families back to the school and to the church, and so that's really lovely to see. But quite a few years ago, Philip and I sort of discussed a way of trying to improve the reach of the church, and we'd come across the idea of like a cafe style church, hadn't we, where families come in with their children. We call it breakfast and tea time church. We do the two so that we can meet the needs of families that find one easier than the other. Where they come in they have some food. If it's breakfast church, they'll have like toast and coffees and things like that with their families. And then Philip leads a real relaxed service where we sing, we do some crafts together. They were really growing in popularity just before COVID. We've just got them set up, going again. But we've had to use the school because it wouldn't be conducive to be able to use or put something like that, of that nature, on in the churches the way it is, without a lot of work to prepare that sort of, and we wanted to do it as regular as every month. So it is a shame, that we're building up that popularity and that interest with not just local families, but families from the Goole area as well, that they're not getting that same experience in church. There's something else, isn't there, about being in this amazing building, not a school hall that was built in the 70s. So that would be an amazing thing to be able to bring into the church. As a school as well, we have grown significantly over the last 10, 20 years. But we are also struggling for space. When we think of things that we would like to do within school, sometimes we have to say no to things and things that we would really love to do because we just don't have the space. We'd love to do more put more things on for parents. But fortunately, if we invite the parents in, we have to kick the children out, and that sort of doesn't really work. But it would be really lovely to do more events with families and children and parents together, and knowing that we could use this as an additional space, which currently it doesn't lend itself to many different types of activities that we feel that we could use it for. It's really exciting, and I will say, Philip, children need an indoor toilet. Because they will be at it probably about 20 times in their visit. That's the favourite thing, isn't it, about visiting somewhere new, is visiting the toilet as well. So when Philip was talking to me about his plans to have the kitchen, to have the indoor toilets, to have more of a movable space, it was really exciting for us as a school to think, the potential that would open, and then just to hear your start of your speech, Philip, about the vulnerability of the church moving forward. It seems really upsetting, doesn't it, to think that actually we're at a point where we are getting more families interested and involved, that we might be at a point where at that juxtaposition where we could potentially lose it. Is that okay? Can I have a wine now?
Yeah.
I don't think before.
we are aiming to make the toilets really beautiful when the children come. Yeah. And there is a little surprise, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But we're now going to have a presentation by Melvin Rose from St Andrews and Epworth, who have done a similar thing there a little while back. And so I think probably I don't need to move the microphone, do I? It tends to pop, this microphone. We tend to usually keep it further away from people, so I'm sorry about it popping.
Firstly, what is St Andrews Epworth famous for? Precisely, and Charles Wesley, which attracts many visitors from quite a few places across the world, probably the chief one being the United States. Most of the things that have been mentioned on here, what you would like to do, we can now do it, and do it with ease because of what we've done. We've had a project which lasted a little over 10 years with the cooperation of English Heritage and the Heritage Lottery Fund and a significant number of other funders. The project costed around £1 million, lasting a few years and over various stages. The early stages were mainly supported by English Heritage, which was the structural work around the outside of the church and the roofs, which some of it was in a terrible state. We then got to the point of saying, well, we've got to do something about the inside. How do we do it? We formed a committee and had many hours discussing things and came up with a plan. And that plan was supported very much so by our architect at the time, Brian Foxley of Yorkshire, who unfortunately is now deceased, but we worked together very, very well, and we were awarded major grants from the Heritage Lottery Fund and other funders and other significant local funding to do many things within the church. We've got a new stone floor, underneath which is underfloor heating, which is very successful. We've got solar panels on the roof, which is, gives us free energy because we got that grant in the early stages of solar panels, and we got a substantial grant, which fully funded that, by the way. Hard work. Removing pews was a dirty phrase. People did not like it. There were protests, petitions, which we didn't accept the petitions. We returned most of them, well, all of them, unless we didn't know who they were. A lot of those who signed petitions weren't even church people, didn't live in Epworth, and were a significant number of miles away. So we told them the right way is through the faculty procedures, of which we duly went through, and we got a major faculty to go ahead with the work. It was upheaval. We had to close the church for quite a few months because we removed all the pews, etc. And it all came to fruition, fortunately, after much hard work. We use it for many things. As I said, that most of the things listed on there we can now do. Very recently we've had events commemorating the coronation. We do have folk dancing in the church. If you're doing things like that, I'm sorry to have to say, get rid of all the pews. They can be a nuisance. When we took our pews out, contractors arrived one Monday morning. I went up at about 10:30 to see what was happening, and the pews were out. As quick as that. We managed to dispose of almost all of them to parishioners who wanted them, apart from one or two which were only fit for the tip, actually. So it all went eventually very, very well. As I say, we've got underfloor heating, we've got solar panels. You'll not get solar panels here. Do you know why?
Trees.
No. You can't hide them. You've no parapet on the roof. That's a must when you start applying for faculties for solar panels. We do have many events, significant number of events. We had the infant school 2 weeks ago, came in 2 stages, and they thoroughly enjoyed themselves, and they enjoyed tinkling around a little bit on the bells. We've got a fine peal of 8 bells. The congregation averages about 50 on a Sunday morning. We have a new vicar now, I think he was a friend of yours. Paul, what's his name? Paul Wilson, that's right. I've only been with him today. Now, I'm going to open it to you. You ask me questions.
Have you noticed significant improvement in the numbers of the congregation?
Well, it's holding up at about 50 on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It's difficult to give precise figures, is it holding up, etc. And we put that down to COVID, we don't know. Anything else?
Will you be able to visits from anyone here?
I would suggest that if you want to see what we've done, come and have a look. I've brought a few photographs with me, which you can have a look when we circulate later.
So in a moment we'll have a break and you can talk to Melvin, look at the pictures individually, and equally if we want to organise a visit we can do. I have been there and it is beautiful. It's been beautifully done, hasn't it? Really high quality work. Yes. And it's a lovely space. I think one of the fears of people is that you'll end up with the space not being as lovely after the pews have been removed, but how do you feel about it?
It feels pretty much the same. The actual church building is the same church building, it's the same shape, same size. The only thing is we've got a fine new floor and there's no pews obstructing things.
Excellent. Right, thank you very much, Melvin, for coming.
Before I move on, we did have many, many objections to removing pews, and there were petitions, as I said earlier. I had a visit from a police officer coming to see what authority I had to remove church pews, and it proved he had no knowledge of church faculty procedures. I think it'd be fair to say the vast majority of those who objected, if we were to say we're going to put the pews back tomorrow, there'll be a bigger objection. Anything else?
Thank you, Melvin. That's been really helpful. And as I say, people can ask him more questions. You know what he looks like now. And I don't know your wife's name. Pauline is also here. So do you want to stand up and people can see you so they can ask relevant questions to you as well if they want? There she is. Right, okay. And I think before with the break, Tom, our architect, is going to just give you some details, and we're going to try and swap the PowerPoint, so that should all go wonderfully well, because technology always does. Yeah, it's okay, we'll just pop it across here. See the screen.
Do I need to?
Yep.
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh, right, okay. Have you got the clicker as well?
These were designers. And it would be reasonably well hidden. The Victorians still do it.
And they did, ahead of their time. You can pull that little. Right. Okay, let's check that. Perfect.
You see it? No, it's on.
That's on, yeah.
It is on. Yeah. Just hold it.
Thank you very much.
So you are welcome to get more drink and food, but Tom's going to give his presentation, so if we could be quiet for a moment.
Good evening, everybody. Philip's just asked me to give a bit of a talk about the project that we've undertaken. I'm the church inspecting architect, which means I carry out the fabric condition inspections, but also work with churches to redevelop their spaces to hopefully make them vibrant, flexible, engaging and fun spaces to celebrate their heritage. So he's asked me to do 10 minutes maximum on the project and add a bit of context really to it, both nationally and regionally, and some other examples. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so hopefully none of you get dizzy. I can't see my slides behind me, so I'm going to rely on what comes up next. As has been alluded to previously, the church is Grade 2 star listed, which places it up in the upper echelons of protected buildings across England, Scotland and Wales, which means that it's of national, local and regional importance, which is really important to remember, that as stewards of these buildings, we're responsible for looking after them and for making sure that they're here for future generations as well. And so it really is, it's a wonderful building. I love the church, and it really is saddening when you have such a beautiful building that is so sort of coveted and well protected, to see them falling onto the Heritage at Risk Register, which Philip alluded to. And it is for two reasons. One, it's for the roof. The reason it's on the list, which is concrete tiles, now about double the expected lifespan of them and pretty much unable to be repaired. Thankfully not leaking yet. But quite a lot of high-level repairs required that will and do threaten the future of the church through rainwater goods and all sorts of stuff that need attention. And you can see, if you turn around and look up there or look at the screen, the impact where that actually is allowing water into the building. The other reason is the stonework. We got significant movement and damage in the vestry, as well as eroding stonework around the church that you can see as you come in and out, and that's as a result of all sorts of factors occurring. You can see the extent of it, particularly outside the porch here. It's quite extreme. So we embarked on a journey really a few years ago to try and repair that, when there was actually Heritage Lottery funding specifically for churches, and seek some funding to assist with the re-roofing and stonework repairs. But found that we were increasingly being met with resistance because of the use or lack of use of the building, other than for limited acts of worship. And that's something that's got more extreme over the years. There's lots of funders out there that will happily give money to protect heritage, but they need to be protecting a building that can evidence love, use by the community, engagement in the heritage. And it's important that any church or heritage asset that's looking to protect its fabric is able to demonstrate that. So while the love for the building was clearly there within the church, it was felt that it needed a wider community appeal, I suppose, engagement, usage, and really for all of you, most of you, I assume, are from the local area, to really take ownership, as has been alluded to, local people protecting their own heritage. This is a really important building, and it's a beautiful building, and you should be proud of it. There's a lot of communities that don't have such stunning buildings within close proximity, so it's something to be loved. And so we said, well, okay then, fine, what do? We need to look at the inside. How do we make that work for us? And how can we make this sort of space, which has its beauty in a sense, but is very much restricted by the pews, into something like this that personally, I've used this a few examples over the years for the church. It's St Brandon's Church up in Brancepeth, right up towards Durham, burnt down a few years ago, rebuilt, a beautiful space, flexible seating, underfloor heating, stone floor, new windows, stunning space, community use in a very small community. And how do you make the space work for the use. And there's the one again there. And really there's two factors to be considering, or two major factors. The first one being the architecture. You have wonderful architecture within the church. There's some lovely features that I'll whiz through a few slides of. But secondly, the people. And in many ways, particularly in the eyes of grant funders, it's the people that matter. It's you that matter. Showing that you love the building, being able to use the building working for you, not you having to try and work the building. We heard from Caroline earlier about having to take the pews out and how that worked. Well, actually, the building should just naturally and organically work through a successful scheme for its users, and flexibility is key within that. Just some of the sort of key beautiful architectural features, which you'll see if you don't already know them as you wander around. You've got the wonderful pew ends up in the choir stalls, the font cover, which we use that cross for a little bit of inspiration, some of the designs. The bottom of the lectern here, the window with Queen Victoria in it, introducing me to the word bespectacled when I looked it up in the listing description. And even what's believed to be a Saxon arch at the back of the church, some wonderful features. And it really is, this is an opportunity to celebrate that and to engage with that, those designs. There are also features that will divide opinions. Some people love it, some people hate it. You've got it. So it's how we sort of utilise that and integrate it. And you've got beautiful roof structure. I mean, okay, fine, it's dark brown wood and plaster, but it's still got an elegance to it, and the light fittings, again, love them or hate them, because it add a certain sense to the space. So it's about how do we bring that architecture into a project to bring people and the building together in a sort of unification. And this isn't a challenge that you're facing alone. This is a challenge across the country. Every church in the Church of England, the Methodist Church, the Catholic Church, everything in between, are facing this same question. And most churches, if they do not react to this, will not be here or will not be usable as churches in 10 to 20 years' time. In a way, it's a bit of a race against time between churches, fighting it off as to who becomes the most successful and who can position themselves in their community as a space. And in a rural community, you're slightly better in that regard. In inner cities, it's more difficult, where they're 10 a penny and you're fighting with your neighbour about whether or not you get this group coming into your church or another one. This is in Hereford. It's a Church All Saints, where they've introduced a cafe which runs all day, every day pretty much, and seating, mezzanine cafe, beautiful space. Allows people to enjoy the architecture in ways they wouldn't previously been able to do. This is a small installation, I'm not exactly sure where it is, but a freestanding pod structure that integrates a kitchen, a toilet, a little mezzanine meeting room, and lift access to it, which very simply goes into an otherwise very open space. But not all projects need to be huge and glamorous, and in that regard, a small kitchen pod or a toilet pod within a church can transform how the building's used. Suddenly it becomes usable by schools. Safeguarding issues with children no longer becomes an issue. You haven't got 30 children trotting off to the loo every 10 seconds in the middle of a service because they can just dash out the door and back in again. Sometimes the architects allowed a bit of artistic flair in it, whether you like it or not. But you can enjoy sitting on the toilet reading a memorial while you're there, so it's a nice project. And another one here, which is one I personally worked on at Chapel Allerton up in Leeds, introducing a meeting room and kitchen at the west end of the church, which received huge opposition from the Victorian Society, surprise, surprise, but got through anyway. It received good support from everybody else, transformed the way the church uses. They've removed some of the pews at the back and they can move them around. And they have teas and coffee groups. I've been to look at various different things, have meetings there in the middle of the week, 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's a thriving environment of people having kids running around, mums on the way back, mums and dads on the way back from school, pop in to have a coffee. Good coffee, that's always important. And so these sort of projects, that's another one there, beautiful architecture sort of the original building being exposed behind the new as well. And so there's really this opportunity to take a project to the interior and make the building beautiful and the user the usage of the building, it might be beautiful as well. And ultimately, you end up with a space, this is my church, which we did a bit of a reordering. It's grade 1 listed, so we were a bit more restricted on the pews, but we did get permission to remove some, and they're all movable and flexible, and they have them taken out every few weeks to run events for kids, craft activities, theatre, all sorts going on in the church, and it really makes for a bright, sunny and colourful space, which is what we want, and just increase usage in the building really to help support the ongoing preservation of the built heritage. So back to St Mary's, what we facing really. Well, Philip alluded to your generous benefactors 150 years ago who put the pews in, who you might want to blame for putting the pews in, because the pews are your primary problem other than the lack of toilet. And thankfully, in a way, we're blessed here that the pews aren't of architectural or historical significance, so it hasn't been too much of a challenge to get rid of them. I think glowing recommendations from the DAC, basically to support it. And removing, as Melvin mentioned, get rid of all the pews. Well, absolutely, that's what we're looking to do. Hopefully you've all come with bulging wallets to buy the pews and take them away. But the entire nave, these drawings are all up over there. I don't expect anybody else to see what's going on them other than the blue blob, and particularly if people have had a glass of wine. So, but the whole of that area, really removing all the pews and levelling out where the pew platforms you sat on with nice new stone level floor, like we've done here at Carverley Church, where it just opens up the entire floor plan, level access, flexible space, enhances the beauty, but retaining the historic stone flags as they are, so that you keep in that element of history. Flexible seating, as Philip mentioned, nice chairs that are lightweight to carry around, stackable, and can be wedged in the corner of the church when not in use, which allows for flexibility in their layout. You can have curvy, wiggly lines, you can have beautiful straight lines, you can have worship in the round, you can have events sat round tables. Beer festivals is something I always promote to every church when they're looking at flexibility, because it gets people through the door and gets people into church as well, generally. Moving the font from the corner over there, this is again St Wilfrid's Church in Carverley. Moving the font, we're doing it over here, but a very similar process of making it level floor around it, so it becomes more integrated into the church rather than wedged behind the door. This was a bit of a visual we did actually of this church sort of early on in the project, with taking out the floor and putting the chairs in. It's a bit crude, but it gives you an element, a sort of a sense of what we're thinking. And then the kitchen and the toilets, putting facilities for kitchen facilities in the back right corner there, or the northwest if you want to compass points, and toilets in the vestry seemed the obvious solution for this. And again, we're looking here at the sort of the pod option, really, because we want to use as minimal floor space as possible so that there's maximum floor space for a variety of uses. And you can fold the kitchen away into cupboards. You'll have probably seen the loads at different churches. There's a few examples earlier. This one just show again, so that they're in cupboards. You can't really see them. Again, this drawing's over there. We've tried to take some inspiration from the design of the church, integrating a bit of the blue into the vertical strips. The cross on the doors taken from the font cover, so that they're bespoke to this church. They're not just a cupboard taken off the shelf and shoved in the corner. This was an early visual of the sort of the idea. So something that's a lighter, a limed oak, which if you don't know how to visualise it, is sort of like the door over there into the vestry, and allows it to blend into the stonework and the background. Movable trugs, little tugs that will go around and offer flexibility to the project. So really, all of these things, the kitchenette, the toilet, I've not gone into detail on the toilet because it's a toilet. It's going to be through there. Will offer some vibrancy to the building, that perhaps that the pews and other lack of facilities are taken away and allow increased use, and hopefully convert this into something like that, where it's jam-packed all of the time and used by many, many different people. And that's the end of everything I've got to say.
Right, thank you very much. I did say that he was the last presentation before the break, but I was lying. I have a very, very short presentation which just tries to point to some of the features of this church that some of you may not know about. Some of you may know about them, but during the break, whilst you've got your second glass of wine, I have mine, or your third, it's fine. As the wedding service says, Jesus enjoyed actually, one of my friends says the first miracle that I should be able to do is turn water into wine, but haven't got there. Is to just tell you something about the things that are in the building. So if any of you don't know about these, you might want to look at them. Or, again, as Thomas said, we have a special space, nationally important space, with some nationally important things. This window, it's up there, is the window with Queen Victoria sat in a wheelchair wearing glasses. She didn't like that picture, but it's done in memory of her. I don't know why, but there it is. We are allegedly one of maybe two in the country with that window. The Saxon arch at the back, which Tom alluded to, it may be that is Saxon. We are pretty certain that this was a Saxon village, even though it's not in the Domesday Book. And we'll hear a bit more about that later. The story of 500 years of burial is beautifully told here. That the back near where Dave Roff is standing, there is a wooden oak memorial board from 1839. Many memorials in the past were done on oak, either like a board or a cross, and when they fell over, you reburied. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. The grave diggers often came across bodies in the graveyard when they were digging for the next grave. And then we get to a point where we start making stone memorials, and one of the first stone memorials we get in this church is those little C's which are out behind the trees over there, and they're because there was a cholera epidemic when Goole was just being built. And there were two cholera epidemics. The isolation ship was in the harbour here, anyhow Goole was in this parish at that point. The burials, mass burials, took place in our churchyard, and they put C's because they didn't want people to rebury in the space where the cholera victims had been buried. And then, of course, we fill up with modern stone memorials, and the Victorians give us another legacy that we run out of space. And so we have to have another churchyard at the other side of the two houses, ours and the Acres, and we have this story told in the artifacts we have. And the Oak Memorial Board and the cholera C's are very rare. They're not something that other people have. All the people I've shown the Oak Memorial Board to, heritage people, none of them have seen one yet. So it's a very significant thing. We have a Jacobean communion table, probably from the Reformation, a Jacobean chair, a Tudor chair. We've got most of those in there. The Jacobean table is in the vestry. We couldn't get it out. There's a medieval door on the vestry I haven't shown a picture of. There's the wall paintings, which may be medieval, on the front wall. Again, significant. There's all the windows, which are mainly catalogue windows, but if you want to know about the windows, talk to Tom, talk to me, talk to others. They are beautiful windows, and there's lots of them. And when you get the toilet, you will actually not be looking at a memorial, but you will look at a window that most of you have never seen. So you can look at being in the toilet enjoying a window. The font, which we don't know the period, we think it's possibly 500 years old, but nobody has identified how old it is or where it came from or what it is. But it's a significant thing. And our natural heritage. When I came here, one of the things in the list of things that it said about the church was, we have the finest copper beech tree in the East Riding of Yorkshire. We have some fine natural heritage and some wonderful people who look after it. We have bats. We're very proud of our bats. We are trying to get it so that you can watch the bats online and see them flying around in church. I'm told they use it as a gym so that they can exercise before the owls try and kill them. We like the owls as well, so we're into our natural heritage. We have a beautiful natural heritage. We have a beautiful graveyard that's well looked after. And we have some carvings. There's one here, and this wonderful one there. You need to find, when you start going to the toilet in the new toilet, you may find him. That's your clue. We've got this brass eagle, a German eagle, 20th century. The bits on the end of the oak pews, which we're keeping in the chancel, are called poppies. Ask the architect. There's the war memorial and the memorial to the airmen who died in the Halifax over in the field over there. And this important cross up here. Do people know what that's made from? Those are timbers of the Wesleyan Chapel when it was taken down. So we've kept the Wesleyan Chapel as part of the memory in this church here. So the Wesleyan Chapel of Hook is remembered in our cross sat here. John Kelly, the archaeologist, is going to speak after the break. Don't know why he's down, but anyhow, he'll come and speak after the break. Have a break, get some more food. We don't want any of it left. Talk to one another, ask questions, think about things, look at things, and then we'll have a few more. They're not very long presentations afterwards. I hate to butt into your conversations, but the archaeologist is going to say something, and then there's going to be a couple of other short things, and then you can carry on conversing and finish the food and drink up all the wine. So we don't... At least I can walk home today, so I'm in a better position than some of you. Right. Do you want to stick them on mine? I've got it. Let me just stick it in here. Right. Yeah, I sometimes think that. Right. Are you going to stand at this?
About the right height?
Yeah, that's about right height.
Yeah.
Okay, can we, you can carry on standing, you can carry on eating, but John, the archaeologist, is going to give a presentation.
It won't be too long. Well, don't get too interested or I'll go on forever. I'm famous for going on forever. That's why I've got...
I think you need to start talking and then they'll listen. I think if you start talking, they'll listen. Right. Okay, so John is going to... do you want to introduce yourself, John?
Righty-ho. I'll talk to everybody instead of just the front row. Okay, so I'll try and keep this quite short because those of you who know me from the excavations we've been doing know that I ramble on and on and on. So I'll try and keep it short. I want to talk about two things, really.
Do you want to say who you are first? Because I haven't
just about to
introduced
do
you
that.
really. Good.
Yeah. So I'm John Kenny. I'm a community archaeologist. That means I work with communities to do the archaeology they want to do. And then I make sure that they're doing it right. But it's all about their interest and what they want to do and what they're doing. So I live over near York, although I'm married to somebody who was brought up in Hook. So it feels like a very familiar place to me because I've driven up and down here many times from York. There's two things I want to talk about really. I got to know the church through Howdenshire Archaeological Society. We got some money to do a project, and that project was actually to take a look at the moated site just outside. And so last year we got a bunch of volunteers together and we worked on the moated site next door. Great fun. We were doing geophysical survey, trying to see if you could see buildings and things under the soil, and we also drew the lumps and bumps and things that are on the site there. So we had a great time. It was a great summer. It was very warm, and we added to some of the work that had been done previously that you can see in some of like the Hall Gas put up over there, which that does show an artist's impression by Chris Rock of what the site might have looked like. And I think that we've proved that certainly that everything on the left-hand side as you look at it is probably round about in the right place, which is fantastic. I wouldn't necessarily say the same for the stuff on the right-hand side, but I'll go and stand next to it later and I'll tell you why I think that the bit on the right-hand side possibly isn't right. While I was here, though, we wanted somewhere where we could actually hold workshops. We wanted somewhere where we could get everyone together before we went out into the field to talk about what we were going to do. So the obvious place to come was the church. For a history group that was hoping to attract people from Hook to get involved, this was the perfect spot. And we were made more than welcome by Philip and Peter and other people, other parishioners. It was fantastic, really, right on site. So we were working out of the church and then over to our site that we were doing our research into. So I'm really quite enthused by the idea of turning this into a better space for use for. We did appear on the list somewhere, heritage groups. I'm quite enthused by the idea of being able to work in a space that's within all this wonderful heritage around us, but at the same time we're not forced to sit in the same regimented way. You know, we can make people feel much more welcome by setting the chairs out in a different sort of way, by making the place feel more welcoming. And so I'm really, really behind the ideas that Philip and the rest of us, the church, have got in doing this, and we would love to come back and do more things out of this place. So, talking to Philip, I said, I've got an archaeologist. There are a few things we need to do. So one of those was to actually have a bit of a look under the floor, because we need to know what's going on underneath the floor, so that eventually we can do a nice new floor. And so we thought this was an ideal opportunity to look at a mysterious thing that had been seen previously back in the 80s, which is a burial in that corner. And that burial was said to be medieval because it was in a lead coffin. And when the guys came and they had a quick peek inside, and what they saw inside was amazing because it was really well preserved, and it was all like there was beautiful cloth, still with colour in it. Absolutely fantastic. And it became a little local legend. I don't know how many of you have heard of this burial, but some of you will have done. It's been kind of a local legend that's been carried forth. We were able to work out exactly what happened, how the burial got there.
Well, some people said it was a knight, and some people said it was a damsel. And what you're going to find out is...
What you're going to find out is what we found. What did we find out? Well, we excavated down under the thing. Here's a picture of the team. There's a different team every night. We worked evenings mostly. There wasn't a lot to do. We removed, as you can probably just see behind the writing on the previous slide, you can just see us opening up, taking up the stone, and underneath the stone it had been backfilled with a lot of rubble. What had happened is that the team who found the burial then thought, we must keep this for posterity. We can't excavate it because the archaeologists would cost a fortune. And actually it would cost quite a lot to actually excavate it, and it might be that you wouldn't get permission to do that anyway. So we approached the diocese about this, and they were not happy about us going around and poking around this burial. But we said, well, all we want to do is check that it's in what position it's in, and how come it's so close to the surface. So we had a reason for it that was to do with the redevelopment of the church. But when we actually got down there, we found that it was no longer an intact lead coffin. It was actually a coffin that had been split from end to end. And it had been like that when it was first found in the 80s. We haven't got any images of what it was like in the 80s, but it absolutely could not have been like that. And I think what's happened is that the people, when they were putting it back in place, in their concern to conserve it, had actually probably put too much stuff in there. There are big concrete slabs over the top of it, and also then rubble on top of that, and the weight had actually caved in the coffin. So it's a bit of a shame, because actually what happened is as soon as they opened it, bacteria got in. And so after the 1980s, it was on a downward sort of spiral of decay. And so, in fact, when we got to look in there, was black paste, was all that was left of the cloth. And a little cushion that went under the head that we were told about was just simply a clump of black paste. We also then investigated the coffin itself much more thoroughly, and we found that what you had there was you had a coffin. So the inside of the coffin was a wooden coffin, and then that had been placed inside a lead coffin, and then the lead coffin and the wooden coffin inside it had been placed inside another wooden coffin. So actually you had 3 layers to the coffin, but not on the top. There was no wooden lid, so we missed that at first. It was only when I went to a coffin expert over at Liverpool University, who first of all said, that shape, that construction, that coffin is dated somewhere between 1700 and about 1850. So rather sadly, it didn't look like it was a medieval burial. It was a fairly high status burial from that Georgian period, really, somewhere between 1700 and 1850, by the shape of the coffin and by the style of the coffin, the little copper nails that were in it. All of that stuff pointed to a particular date. There was a burial inside. We got an osteologist to come out. We couldn't lift it. We couldn't take it out, that we weren't allowed to lift the burial out. But at the same time, it was in a right state because it had broken open. So what we did do is we got an osteologist who's a human bone expert to come and look, and they were able to find enough of the body because rather sadly all the middle area had gone. So probably since 1980 all the middle parts had rotted away, even the arms, which is a bit unusual. Usually the arms survive, but all the ribs and the spine can go. But the legs were still okay, and the skull was still okay, and the bit of the pelvis was okay. And that has a thing called a pelvic notch. And the pelvic notch in it, at a certain angle, will tell you if it's a female. So it was a female, and they thought that they were sort of middle-aged, sort of somewhere between 40 and 60. So actually, we'd found out quite a lot about this poor person who we'd disturbed. The best thing we could do was actually protect her from any more disruption by actually trying to support the inside of the coffin. So what we did was we covered her over in kind of, it's a bit like packing that you might use in a you get from Amazon, except it's all acid free and all that sort of thing, and a bit more expensive. So we covered her over in that, and then we filled the coffin up with pea gravel. And pea gravel, when you pour it, runs into all the corners, and so it filled up the coffin, and then we bent the lead back into place. So, and then it was all supported from inside by the pea gravel. And we built a little brick thing around the skull so that didn't get crushed. So what we've done is tried to conserve what's left. But I'm afraid really it's never going to be. The people who were there in the 80s really saw it at its finest, apart from the people who buried her.
And we also said prayers, and
we did.
That was, I think, very moving, thinking about somebody 250 years ago who worshipped in this church, who was part of our community, and has decayed. But we as Christians believe she's raised and alive. So there was some real poignancy about reburying a body from that period.
It was, and it did give us a chance. That's maybe the good thing for an archaeologist to work with a vicar, to be honest, because it gave me a chance to really think about what I was doing. You do think about these things. You know, when you're confronted with somebody else's mortality, it makes you think about your own mortality. Even though you're an archaeologist, you work with these things. But every time you work with a human remains, it makes you think of your mortality. So it was great to have Philip here to give a bit of a prayer. That was good, and very much I felt part of the community. We only think we've been back through the burial records, and the only high status burial that fits the bill is actually Elizabeth Godfrey, who's commemorated up here. And when you read the commemoration, it says buried near here, not right in front of here. And they might have even had a little chapel around the corner there. We don't, they're not chapel, but their own little altar. So it was a really good community experience, made up of a few members of the Howdenshire Archaeology Society, a few members of the excavation team from Hook, who are now helping out on the Moated site, and then some other volunteers, some of whom I can see with us today. Philip sort of got involved as well. So there was a real nice mix of people, and I'm going to write up a report, which I'm sure people will be able to get their hands on once it's done. It'll be available, either as something printed out or just electronically, so you can look at it on your computer. So it'll include that, and it'll also include whatever we do in the graveyard as well, because we're going to help in the same way as we did with this. We're going to help by digging the trenches for the new oil tank. So I'll oversee it, but volunteers will do the digging. So that really makes the work a work of community. It's not just about making all these changes and buying people in. We can give a little bit and reduce the costs a bit by doing it as a work of community, as long as they're supported by a professional archaeologist. So I'll tell you a little bit very quickly about what we're doing next door, just while we're at it. So we're excavating there on the medieval manor house, and we're doing 2 trenches, one of which, let's just see what right, so that's just a typical day sitting around drinking coffee and not doing any work whatsoever. But that's also part of what it's all about, is actually meeting new friends, meeting people and having a good time. I should say thank you to Richard for allowing us to do that as well, really. Thank you. And we did manage to get the tent back. I'm going to put it up, and the first night almost it got blown down by the gales, the last gales we've had, and finished up in a tree in next door's garden. But luckily the tree saved it, otherwise it would have gone through their conservatory, so I'm pretty glad that it didn't happen. I would have been forking out of my insurance. Right, very strange looking picture. I'll go over and point at things, but I'll shout. What that is, that's the geophysics that we did, printed out in a bright colour. But these little green lines sitting on the blue, those suggest that there might be walls there. So what we've done is we've gone right into this top corner here, which is that side, and we've gone right down in the bottom corner here to keep away from all the red stuff, because the red stuff is more modern dumping. There's been more modern dumping dumped onto some of these parts here, so we got away from that right into the corners to have a look and see what we could find. What we were aiming for on this, if you can see it, so you might not be able to see it, is see if the green was a building here, and whether the green lines are part of the building on here. That's just an artist's impression, based on the fact that they found some pottery and things. So we did 2 trenches. Well, now we've got 3, but actually 2 of them are the same trench, but just parted and with permission from Historic England. So this is the trench number 1, and that is actually the core of a foundation of a building. So it doesn't necessarily look that amazing. Well, it's just a bunch of rocks. But actually, it's very, very interesting, because that bunch of rocks actually provides the support for what must, I think, be a timber-framed building. So I think Philip's claim that this is the only stone building in the area still works. Hooray! Because it looks like they've got stone footings, and we now know where that chap's just poured some water and is whacking away, flailing aimlessly with a small mattock. We have actually now found that there's a clay footing underneath that, underneath the line of the stone there. And actually, we also now know that after they took the building down, they tried ploughing it, because you can see where the plough has clipped the stone and moved it around in the soil, and it's also removed all the evidence for the trench they dug to put it in. When you build a foundation, you dig a ditch first, and then fill it with stone, and we couldn't find the ditch. Where'd it gone? But all the stone dotted around it had been pulled up by the ploughing, and that had wrecked the evidence of the top of the ditch. But below where that fellow is digging, so he didn't find it, but someone found it today, so it's great. It's a discovery from today, so I haven't had time to put a new picture up. But if you're on the Facebook page, I have put that up. So there's a more recent photo that shows quite clearly where the bottom clay underneath that stone is. So although it looks a bit dull, it's actually really exciting, because that is part of the corner of a building just exactly where Chris put one on there. I think it might be non-domestic because we've hardly found any pottery. Little bits of pottery, but not very much pottery in this trench, and not very much brick. One brick, I think, but plenty of roof tile. So it looks like you've got a timber frame building with, at least at the end, a tiled roof. So it could be a barn, it could be a blacksmith, something like that. It could be a stable, all sorts of possibilities. And we're not really going to be opening up a big enough area to try and work out what. But at least we know it's there, and that's a big start, actually. So this is the next trench. So that's just looking at the very top of it, and it looks just like a bunch of stones. And yeah, just checking that that's the right thing, the right picture. And well, actually, what it is, you can see probably from if you're close enough anyway, that quite a lot of those stones are actually like orange. And what that actually is the top of the demolition that they've spread across the whole of that far end site. So where we had no demolition really over the top of our foundation, there's loads of demolition there. It's about that thick. So you've got about a thickness of that made up of roof tiles, bricks, stones, and domestic pottery. So that looks like that's where a house has been, because domestic pottery. You've got brick for a chimney, and you've got stone in there, which would have been part of foundations. So we've gone along quite a long way since that. In fact, what we found, this is what I did last week, and so there are better pictures of this now. But the areas that I've marked out in orange are post holes. So you've got two good ones at the bottom, right in front of the camera. And then you've got one that we were only suspicious of, and I'm still only suspicious of, further back. And then also behind that, there's a bunch of stone that does seem to be set in the ground that might be the top of a foundation for a wall, but it's still only suspicious of at the moment. We need to do more investigation. But the middle post hole, and now we've found, goes down so deep. We're only allowed to dig 80 centimetres down because we've got permission from Historic England, from the government, in fact, a scheduled ancient monument consent. It's very, very prescriptive. If any change we want to make in what we're doing, we have to beg from the Inspector of Ancient Monuments to do it. But luckily, the bottom of that hole is exactly 80 centimetres down. But the bottom of it, most of the bottom is covered in stone. So they've actually dug a big hole, filled it up with stone to about that depth, and then put an enormous post about the size of these pillars in here into it. So it looks like it's holding something big up, holding up a roof. It won't be holding it up entirely, because again, if it is mostly a timber frame building, it also holds itself together. So timber frame buildings are great in some respects because they're more self-supporting than a stone building like this. You know, each of those braces and things all are taking some of the weight, so you can move them around. So that's what we found over the way, and another report will come out about that. So in the end, you'll be able to read all these reports and see what we've been getting up to. And some of the people who've been working with us, Dave, I saw earlier, you know, so there's a whole bunch of people from Hook who've been on site doing different things at different times, and we've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's been great working with Philip, and it will be great using this space in a more flexible way. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, John. And I'm sure people will want to talk to John and talk about
Just
that.
come and call me, yeah.
Yeah, he's there, and he's here most Tuesdays and most Sundays on the moat at the moment.
I should say, actually, don't think that you can, you know, you're local. If you potter over and have a look, we'll show. We won't go, oh, go away. This is an archaeological excavation. We don't want anyone here who's not working on the site. You're welcome to come over, and one of us will talk you around and show you what we've been doing. So, you know, it's not closed off from people. I mean, normally Richard doesn't like everyone trampling over his land, and that's fine. But when we're there to look after you, then we can show you what's going on.
Okay, so thank you very much, John, for that. And I think the next person is Henry, is it? I think Henry's going to say something next. I don't know. Can't remember. I'll plug my presentation back in and find it somebody completely different, but I think it is Henry. No. He's not got me. Henry's being very carefully trying to keep to 2 minutes. So you could... Oh, I didn't mean to do that. So let me just... So I've just done the wrong thing there. Right. Let's go back to that side. How do you start this thing? I'm sure there's somebody who knows how to do these things. Slideshow. Go on. Let me in. Start from current slide. Have you still got the dibber thing? Henry, you can get... Oh, you need to lift the microphone up, okay. Henry.
Hello. Do you want me to go? No?
Yeah, why not?
Thank you, just like we rehearsed. That was good. So, good evening.
Oh, okay, I was going to give thanks, but you can do your bit and then I'll give thanks.
Right.
Or shall I give the thanks first? You can stand there whilst I give thanks.
It's quite disconcerting not being able to see you and hear your voice in a church, by the way.
Right, oh well, there you are.
There we go.
Right, okay. I just wanted to say we have achieved a lot already. We've experimented, we've set aside money to pay for the architect advisors, planning, moving the oil tank. We've got permissions, which are sometimes very difficult. Well, they've been horrendous to get, to be honest. It's been really difficult getting permission to do this work. And the computers decided to jump back out of that for reasons that are entirely in its own thinking, but will persuade it. So I wanted to give thanks, and I want to thank various people who've helped us. So we'll see whether the computer comes back in. If it doesn't, I'll try and remember the list of people, which is the bit I'm dreading of this presentation, because I will forget to give thanks to somebody, and then I will need to beg for forgiveness. So please, if you've done something really important and you're not thanked, please come up and groan at me, and I'll beg for forgiveness, because you've done a brilliant job. So thank you to those who've helped, especially Howden's Kitchens, who are donating the internals of the kitchenette. Rob Parkinson and Vicky Lawson, who couldn't be here, but they organised the band nights. They've organised other fundraising and have been brilliant. Jason and Lynn at the Southern Arms, who've supported us on various occasions. Dinesh at Hook Village Shop, who was here, he's at the back there. And Colin at the Blacksmith, and they both supplied help with today's event. I don't think Colin's here, is he? No. Broadley Printers have helped with some of the banners and things. Those who cycled and walked on the various events that we've already held, You know who you are. Other donors, people who've sponsored us when we did cycling, when we've done other things, people who've given. Each little bit you've done, and there are, and Henry's going to mention the mice over there, and those are on the fundraising group. But there is a fundraising group. Joanne, Janet, Glenys, Henry, Sarah, Peter, Vicky, Dave, me, and Justin, who does the social media for us and does other things around the church. I was going to get everyone to stand up so you could see us and know who you are, but you know who these people are, or you'll find them. But if you want to know anything, there's more than me to talk to. Henry Cook, the project treasurer.
Okay. That was smooth, wasn't it? Good, thank you, Philip. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many people here. My name is Henry Cook, and I've been asked by Philip to explain the numbers behind all of this, the finances, the pounds, the pennies, everything else that sits behind this project. I've got to say, when I first came to this church, and we obviously had a connection with Philip would take my wife Becca and I round and show us the Tudor chair, the Jacobean table, and I like a bit of history. I like it, I enjoy it. But there were two things I took from Philip's very, very comprehensive lecture throughout our time in this church, and that was that Queen Victoria and I have a lot in common. I hate pictures of me too, to be honest, and we both wear glasses. I haven't got mine, so I can just see a blur, to be honest, at the minute. And the second is, if that's the height of an archway we're dealing with as the Saxons, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes, either permanently concussed or having a really bad back. So yeah, that was the kind of two things I took from it. So, in terms of the budget, we've got a long way to go with this journey, but hopefully over the next few minutes I can break it down to a digestible, tangible, and most importantly, achievable thing for us to do as a community. Phase 1, okay? £175,000. That's a lot of money, okay? But, as I say, let me break it down. Phase 1 is directed at creating a space where this community can flourish, okay? That includes things like going pewless and replacing them with chairs, the disabled access and toilet, access to refreshment facilities and washing up, improving the audio-visual side of things, AV, as it's known as, and of course, as has been touched on before, moving the fonts so you can have more better orchestrated baptisms, okay? And all of those things will help us allow our community to flourish. And I've got to say, Tom, you touched on Branspeth as an example in your presentation. My family's actually from Branspeth, and the space in which they've created with that, it is stunning. That picture, it touched on it, but it doesn't do it justice. The flexibility and the endless opportunities you have by doing that. I know pews are incredibly important and a part of our history, but I'll come on to how you can have a part of that history later in this presentation. So, let's break up that phase 1 into stage 1, okay? That will go towards things like better insulation. Melvin spoke about the options of underfloor heating at Epworth, levelling the floor, moving the font, and also the path lighting outside, and of course the cost of the chairs themselves. How can we do this? That element, that stage, £72,000. Again, sharp intake of breath. But we can do that through things such as having the pews which we're currently sat on. They will go, but someone can have access to that piece of history from their own community, and we're delighted to be able to say that we can sell those pews to anyone who wishes to have one for £100 per pew. We've already had a few people sign up. Philip, how many is it now that we've had sign up for pews? I don't know. Philip doesn't know. I think, yeah, seven? Did someone say 7? I think it's 7. But again...
There's 21 in total, and 7 have gone.
21 in total, and 7 have gone already, and we've only announced that over a very short space of time. If anyone is interested in having access to one of these incredible pieces, please see at the back there is a sign-up sheet where you can register your details. There's Sarah waving her hand if everyone can see
And
that.
Henry, you have remembered that people can shorten them.
Yes, people can shorten the pews. You don't have to have the full-on pew. You can, of course, it can be cut and shortened.
And then it will fit in a space that you want it to fit in.
Yeah, and they can fit in a space. It's just like we rehearsed, isn't it? So, pews, and that alone, 21 pews, £100, £2,100. There we go. We're already making a dent in it. Okay? The chairs themselves, in terms of the chairs, Philip, do you want to demonstrate again, just like we rehearsed? Here is a chair.
I shall be the beautiful assistant.
There we go. And Philip, as I understand, there's a bit of history about this particular style of chair and where it may also be used.
Well, if anybody watched the coronation, a chair very similar to this was used in Westminster Abbey at the coronation. So, although I think theirs were the more expensive one, and when you hear how much these chairs are, you'll be surprised that theirs were more expensive, but I think theirs were the £250 chair rather than this chair, which is a little bit less. But anyhow, here they are, and there's two of them we've got, and they stack. I like that, and you can see we've got some other chairs which unfortunately we weren't allowed to have padding. The authorities that be decided that you have to have a hard seat, so you'll need to bring your own cushion. But anyhow, they do stack 25 high on a dolly like the one that's at the back, which means that we can clear the space and store them nice and neatly, and these are reasonably light and easily moved around and also very robust. We've got a 10-year guarantee on each chair, but we're looking more at 25 to 40 years, and they're steel. So hopefully.
And in terms of should anyone want to sort of sponsor one of these chairs, it is £125, and as a result of that, an individual would be able to have a name or a dedication. It could be for a family, and it would be on the back of the chair. Is that right? In terms of
Yeah, we think it will be on the back of the chair. There are some examples of plaques, and you can have quite detailed wording of the people who are doing them. And we didn't thank you, did we? Sorry, Esme Signs. Thank you to Esme Signs, who are helping us with that. There's a sample of theirs at the back there with my dad's name on and an inscription I would like, because I'm going to buy a chair in memory of my mum and dad. And we hope that those will last on the chairs, but there is a provision on the sign-up sheet which basically says you don't get to sit in your own chair.
So there we go. And on that note, so again, it's a lovely form of kind of whether it be remembrance or whether to sort of have something tangible that you've got within your own community in this hub, in which has been around for so many years. Thank you. Thank you very much. So pews, chairs. Philip touched on our church mice, the 800 mice, some of which are just by the door there. Feel free, they make excellent toys, whether it be for children, whether it be for cats, anything like that, or just a nice ornament if your cat wants to absolutely massacre a small church mice. The recommended donation, I believe, is £2 for that. £2, is that correct? Yes, £2 for a lovely little donation there, should you be interested. So church mice. Finally, things like simple donations. I did sort of a couple of numbers. By the way, we're ticking away on that 72,000. We're chipping away at it with all these little things that we can all get involved in from this evening, okay? Final example, a simple donation. If 100 people from this village that I've moved to, I'm from the northeast, but I immediately get a sense of belonging. I'm not a Yorkshireman, no matter how hard I try. A-up just doesn't carry the same in my accent, okay? But, hopefully one day I'll get there. But if 100 people from this village donated £20 per month for 1 year and then stopped, just 1 year, we'd end up with £24,000. £24,000. Done. After 1 year, stop. Hey, you want to extend it for 2 years? That's fine. You want to extend it for 3? That's even finer. Okay? But just an example there of how a regular contribution, and again, should someone want to set up that regular contribution for 1 year and then stop, there's information at the back, similar to where the pews and indeed where you'd like to sign up for the chairs. We can do this. We can do this phase 1. We can. It is very, very achievable. And as Philip was touching on before, if we get this stage done now, the remaining stages become a lot easier, because then we can go to the grants and we can turn around and say, look, we're doing this. We're getting this money through. We're doing this as a community. And they can then go, oh, right, okay, let's move on to the phase 2 of your roof. Let's move on to the phase 3 of whatever else you've got planned to create this space that we've got in this incredible building. And finally, in terms of fundraising, we've got some incredible activities. We mentioned things like band nights. We've done cycle rides previously. And I would like to invite Dave Roffey to come up to explain a bit more about fundraising. But guys, we can do this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers,
Yes, we do have a card machine. Yep, we've got a card machine that we use for collections, although we're just working on trying to make it better used. But we do have a card machine, and it's currently sat in the vestry charging, but it might be out there by the end of the evening.
Cheers there, Henry, for that. As you mentioned, I'm Dave Roffey from the village. I do know most of you in here, but please, if you want to have a chat afterwards, come and give us a knock. I've been involved with quite a bit of the charity events that we've done early on. The cycle ride, we've done the cycle ride from Devizes, 240 miles back to the village, where the school got involved right at the end, which was fantastic. We raised a real lot of money with that, and since then we've done the World's Way walk and a couple of other smaller events. What we have got going on is the Dales Way walk next Wednesday, when there's 4 of us going from the village up to Ilkley, walking from Ilkley to Bowness on Windermere. It's been a bit close to encourage people to join us with setting up the website and everything else that's been in its infancy at present. But again, we've got 2 or 3 years where we're going to carry on these different events. On the 21st of June, it's Wednesday evening, longest day, we've got a 10k run, 5k run, and a 1 mile walk or run. And we're trying to encourage as many people to get involved with that as we can. What we're wanting to do is focus it on the school and on the children and families to get involved. And once they get involved with it, they'll then understand that it's about the church. Come into the church and be amongst you people that are in here this evening. It's great that there's a great turnout this evening, but I believe it's the children, not so much youngest children, you know, but middle-aged, that we need to get more of them into here to keep it going. So we're really encouraging them to get involved with this run, walk, jog, at whatever distance you choose. There's a few other events that have in the pipeline. Jason's got ideas, but he's looking for ideas from yourselves that you may think may be a good run. And also Colin at the Blacksmiths has got a couple of events planned. I do believe moving forward, when the pews come out, that the events in here will really work on the fundraising moving forward. Just a real quick one. I'd spent 6 years at Chelsea Barracks in London, and I've been in the chapel there many times for christenings, funerals and weddings over that 6 years. And when Philip mentioned about the charity event of the cycling that I went on, I was getting my head around what was going on with it and what was going on with the pews. And the pews has been a big call, has been mentioned. after we did the cycle from Devizes here, I was back in London with the family, and we went back to Chelsea Barracks. Chelsea Barracks had been all pulled down, but the chapel was still remaining. So we walked through, and I was there with my children. I said, oh, flip, we've got to go see the chapel. Great memories of this place. Went in, no pews in there whatsoever. And I was like, wow, this is absolutely what Philip's been telling me all about. All the pews had gone, and there was an art exhibition going on in there. And it was like this, but really, really modern, but still had its old work in there. And I spoke to the guy and I said, what's this all about? What's going on? He says, oh, it's just an art exhibition this weekend. I said, and what about the church side and the Christians? Oh no, they still all happen. We just move it around and change it all around, so it's moving on. And I thought, flipping spot on. That's exactly what we're hoping to do back in Hook, or what we are doing back in Hook. So that was just a little bit of a tilt on it for myself that's drove me on moving forward. But please, if any of you have got any ideas to do any events yourselves, not everybody's into cycling 240 miles or walking across the Wolds or doing the Dales Way or doing a 10k run. I do believe moving forward, the events in here in this church are going to be the ones that are going to count, that are going to get the people into here. But please, if you've got any ideas, give us a shout and I'll have a chat and discuss it through later on. Thanks very much.
I think Dave is also up for the last one on that list, which Neil's also involved in thinking about. Which is the Vicar of Hook in the turn of the century lived in Hook Hall. I obviously came to Hook at the wrong moment. He had five servants and his own cricket team, it seems. But anyhow, he was a very keen cricketer, and his obituary says he was the best kind of country parson. He was into his sport. It mentions nothing about his care for his parishioners or anything of that kind. It then goes on to say he particularly loved cricket. He played for Gould Town, he played for Hook. On his 70th birthday, he had a retirement match. He announced his retirement. There is a picture in the Hook book of the cricketers gathered together on his 70th birthday for his retirement match. There's also a picture of him preparing a wicket. And then the obituary carries on with his love of horticulture and his engagement with the Yorkshire Show and other things that he did, at the end of which it says, for his years, Reverend Booth, who installed some of the windows in the church, paid for them. He obviously had more money than I have. For his years, he was an ardent cyclist. On more than one occasion, he had ridden from Hook to London and back on his tricycle. There is in the Hook book a picture of him on his tricycle. We're going to try and emulate him by riding from Headingley to Lords on tricycles. They're not little children's tricycles, I'm afraid. We're going to reuse tricycles like he used. But we're hoping to do that. And what we're hoping to do is to kind of get across the message that we're from Yorkshire, and we realise that you can't, that you don't get anything for now, and you've got to work hard. We're putting in a bit of effort. If you could give us just a few of your hard-earned quid, that would help. And we're going to try and raise that from a lot of people. So we're going to make that as much popularised across the county, across the country, by using social media, by trying to get into the media, and then hopefully if we can get 10,000 people to give us 2 or 3 quid, that's £30,000, isn't it? But also we will, as well as all those fundraising things, be able to access some small grants now, so those will add to the amounts that we need now. So it's not just the big grants at the end that we'll be able to access. There are grants we can get if we show that we're doing this kind of thing, but we won't get if we're not. And here is the restoration card reader and thing which is going to go by the door. And there is a website. I won't show it to you now. It's hookchurch.org.uk. Most of the information is there. So there are the opportunity for questions, to get some more drink. As I say, we don't want any of the food left. So do eat up and make sure you do that. We're not so worried about the wine. No, do finish. Oops, I obviously had to do much of it as well. Don't trip over the chairs. They will be linked together and they should stop you tripping over them. I will put this by the door. You can sign up for some of the things at the back there. Sarah will help you if needs be. If any of you want to know how to get onto Just Giving, which is one of the things we use to sponsor people, Sarah will help you if you need help. So you don't need to kind of feel scared about using those things. I won't go on. You want to talk and chat. I think some people wanted to ask questions or so on. Let me find the microphone. Anybody seen? What did Tom do with the microphone?
On the pulpit.
On the pulpit. There you are. Right. Was there anyone who wanted to ask a particular question? Peter.
Can I just ask whether or not the chairs will be also some chairs with arms? Because most public authorities, and I speak from personal experience, they're low and...
Right, there are some samples of the chairs with arms on. I think Gary sat in one. Have you got arms, Gary? Are you awake? Gary, no, he wouldn't drink too much wine. There are some samples of those chairs with arms. We're looking at 10% of the chairs with arms. But we're not kind of doing that on the sponsorship.
Can I just also mention for Henry, when he mentioned £20 a month by standing order, it's very simple. We all pay too much tax. Well, if you do it right on the gift aid scheme, £20 becomes 25, £200 becomes 250, and the thousands suddenly disappear. So I commend that mechanism to everybody in this room. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If you do pay tax, they're gift aid. Anybody else? Too much tax. Jenny wants to say something. Jenny.
I don't think I'll need that, will I?
Well, it helps for various reasons.
Well, everybody here, everybody would know that I'm chairman of the Hook Memorial Hall, and I was totally against at the very beginning of removing the pews. But after a thought, I agreed with Caroline. And I thought, yes, we do need to modernise in this church, and we do need to get the pews out and to sell them to our parishioners so we can get a lot more money towards the community, and also for the children to enjoy much more space. I do agree with you about the chairs, but won't they be a bit uncomfortable, Philip? I mean, they are either for an ample backside like mine, they would be wonderful. But for other parishioners, I suggest you maybe shorten your sermon.
You can always shout me down. I wrote a 16-page document trying to persuade them to give us chairs with padding, and they still refused. I despair of that, but anyhow, that's just one of those things. We lost on that one, but we won on everything else. So, Sarah.
Hello. Just following on from that, if we have any knitters or sewers in the room, what I thought would be really lovely to continue the tradition of our cushions we currently have on the pews.
Hassocks, they're called.
If someone could design a cushion to go on the chairs and produce a template that we can download from the website that people can then knit or sew or crochet, then you can have your own padded seat with your name on without paying to sponsor a chair. Something for everybody. For just £25.
Anyhow, anybody else ask questions, clarification, want to say anything, or do you just want to drink more wine and eat more food? Yeah, okay, we'll do that. There's with his tricycle.